This conference will now be recorded.
A word to the wise about our next couple of sessions in October and November. We're going to move to, we're going to use a Tuesday. We have a tentative setup already for October 13th. It's a Tuesday in October on the Parklets program here in Syracuse. We moved to Tuesday because the Green Building Conference is going virtual during October and November and using Friday, and we didn't want to compete with people wanting to be on webinars with the Green Building Conference. I'm sure Diane can provide more information about that conference if you need to know more about it. You can always check out our newsletter, and if you don't get our newsletter already, please let us know and we can get you on our distribution list. I'm going to forego going around the room today. It looks like we have a lot of people. I don't know how many people. It looks like 23 people here. Sometimes we do go around the table, but I think probably it would be a good thing to just pass on that. Maybe if you get a chance to speak, again, by putting something in the chat and getting recognized, just you'll have a chance then to say who you are and who you're with. But today's program, another in a series of discussions on affordable housing, green housing options, but also the I-81, the Viaduct project, sort of a nexus of several important issues in the community here. With also, that kind of respond also to some national issues that we're facing right now. So I think this is an important discussion. We titled it "Affordable and Green Housing in Syracuse's Community Grid." And to deliver the presentation today, we have three wonderful speakers for you. First up will be Baxter Hankin. He's an architectural intern at Robert Stern Architects in New York City. I probably don't have to tell you much about that firm. You probably have heard of that name before. Baxter is originally from Fairfield County, Connecticut. He's a member of the Congress for New Urbanism. But most importantly, he's a 2020 Syracuse University School of Architecture graduate, and he's started a master's degree in real estate development at NYU. And while at SU, he did his thesis on a neighborhood design and plan for the future of the northern part of the community grid. And so so when we heard about this, and Baxter and Diane, I think, had an opportunity to talk, and when we said, yeah, this would be we would love to hear what your thesis was all about. So Baxter is here. Welcome to present this. Baxter, while working on this thesis, he immersed himself in the neighborhood. He lived near Foreman Park. And also to talk about the overall planning in Syracuse as it relates to this area, particularly the rezone and how that impacts the area. Dan Koznowski, the Director of Planning for the Syracuse-Onondaga County Planning Agency, will join us today. Dan has been Director at SACPA for 2 years and leads the effort on a new countywide plan, a farmland protection plan update, and the Rezone Syracuse program, also some town planning efforts. Yeah, Dan is a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. He's worked in this as a planner for almost 20 years in the areas of environmental planning, town planning, river restoration specialist. He's also executive director of the Lake Placid Land Conservancy. Dan actually studied here at the SUNY ESF with an MS in environmental policy. And welcome, Dan. We're glad you could join us today. And then finally, we'll hear from Shannon Fabiani, the community energy educator at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Onondaga County. In this role, Shannon delivers NYSERDA's community energy program to county residents. By providing free support for residents, tenants, landlords, and small businesses and farms in Central New York looking to make their home or workplace safer, more comfortable, and reduce energy consumption. So we're pleased that Shannon volunteered to join this panel to tell us how these programs can help support the planning and future of this area. As you know, we have an opportunity here to create something brand new, and we can create a green community right here under the shadow or after the shadow of the viaduct. So I think without further ado, yes.
Can I interrupt for just a second? We forgot the shameless self-promotion part of our introduction to Greening USA. And I know Jeff is our membership chair, and he said that he would like to say a few words. Jeff, are you still with us, or did you have to drop off?
I went to audio. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Let's hear from
great.
Jeff, our membership chair.
Great. Thank you, John, Diane. I'll be brief, everyone, because it is a shameless kind of plug here. This is Greening USA's Green Bag Lunch, as you all know. We've hosted these about once a month, but we've had a number of them, and recently also because of COVID. So if you've been enjoying these, I'd just like to encourage everyone to become a member of Greening USA. As you may know, we are a nonprofit with no paid staff. We do lots of events such as this. The annual meeting, which was very successful several months ago, bringing several different organizations together for conversations. Some of the other events we do are kind of on hold with some of like the Sustainability Academy and some of the other meeting in-person events. But I would just like to encourage anyone, if you find value in what we do here, please try to show us by becoming a member, even becoming more involved with the board, or helping us with some ideas for future Green Bag lunches. We're always looking for suggestions, and we feel that this is a really good time for community, and this is the best way we can show it. We're happy you're here, and we would be happier if you became a member as well. So I'll probably be reaching out to everybody as best I can, providing them with the information to join. We have a new website coming online, if it hasn't already, where you can join. But like I said, I want to keep it short and brief and encourage you to become a member of Greening USA if you find value in it. So without further ado, I'm interested in hearing this. There's some exciting things going on with the potential redevelopment of 81. So Baxter, I know, is a member, so I'm interested. Everybody.
All right, thanks, Jeff. It was good hearing from you. Yeah, and just to point out that the web page greeningusa.org, the original web page is still up and still live, and you can join there and you can donate there still. Hopefully, we'll be turning over to the new one soon. And if you have any questions about that, Diane can address that. But also check us out on Facebook too. I think. With that, we're gonna hear from Baxter, and then we're gonna hear from Dan, and then Shannon will speak. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Baxter.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. I'm Baxter Hankin, Syracuse University School of Architecture grad this year, and this presentation is about affordable and green housing in Syracuse's community grid. If you're further interested in some of the topics I'm talking about, and specifically the work that I've done on my thesis, there's a link below for reference. So to begin this presentation, I'd like to talk about the urban history of Syracuse, New York. And in the northern part of the 15th Ward in 1953, this is sort of what a map of the area would look like. There's a lot of buildings, a lot of housing, affordable housing, and the community is fairly cohesive and complete. And what happened since 1953 all the way to today is the community has sort of lost a lot of its buildings, has really gotten a lot of underutilized land and vacant lots, and has really turned into less of a complete community with a lack of housing, including a lack of affordable housing. And a lot of this had to do with redlining and other policies that really disinvested from and disempowered poor communities and central urban communities in cities across America, including Syracuse. The current condition of the northern part of the 15th Ward, which is where my thesis focused on, is currently looking like this, with a lot of vacant and empty lots, and with the I-81 Viaduct cutting through the neighborhood. And as the State Department of Transportation hopefully implements the community grid redesign, the neighborhood has an opportunity to transform into something like this. It's more of a complete community with much more housing, affordable housing, other uses, and public spaces in a very interconnected and complete neighborhood. And in order to create affordable housing, we have to build a city that is equitable, vibrant, and resilient urbanism. And in order to do that, there's a variety of different techniques and motivations that I will go through here. The first of these is fine-grained urbanism. Coarse-grained urbanism, containing potentially the same density as the coarse-grained block, in which one building might take up the entire city block. And we have a lot of great examples of fine-grained urbanism right here in Syracuse, such as neighborhoods like Armory Square and really other areas across the entire city. But in terms of recent construction, a lot of the new housing being built is coarse-grained urbanism, such as student apartment buildings that take up entire city blocks. And some of the benefits of fine-grained urbanism above coarse-grained urbanism include ownership, such as ownership benefits such as small, local, and varied ownership, which reduces the consolidation of power and lowers startup costs for small businesses such as small developers and commercial tenants. All of these really contributing to allowing for more potential affordable housing than in a coarse-grained city. And other benefits also include resilience, such as a failure of a small building in fine-grained urbanism has a low impact on the neighborhood, whereas a failure of a large building in coarse-grained urbanism has a disproportionate and devastating impact on a neighborhood. And fine-grained urbanism is really incremental and cautious, making the affordable housing and really all other things in the neighborhood much more resilient. In terms of usership, fine-grained urbanism is more diverse horizontally and more integrated, as you don't get a situation where necessarily an entire block of the city is one building and therefore only one demographic and one use. Really, in coarse-grained urbanism, segregating people into different parts of the city and different city blocks. It also creates an opportunity for varied and mixed uses, for vibrancy and economic opportunity in terms of both employment and in terms of starting a small business. Affordable housing necessarily requires resources and maintenance and is very intertwined with the public sector, and therefore, in order to understand how to better create affordable housing, we have to look at the fiscal solvency of our community at large in terms of government. And this is a map done by Urban 3 of Onondaga County, showing taxable value per acre. And what you might notice is that the denser areas of the county, regardless of income level of those areas, provide more taxable value per acre, creating a more financially productive development pattern. And we should look at financial productivity in terms of taxable value per acre and not just taxable value of a lot in general, as other important ways of measuring productive land use, such as looking at the productivity of farming, also look at their economic output per acre and not as a whole. And this is another map showing productivity per acre of land use, except in Lafayette, Louisiana, where the same organization that did that map of Onondaga County created this, showing which areas of Lafayette, Louisiana were generating more tax revenue than it took for the city to maintain those areas' resources, and which areas, shown in blue here, of the city were losing money for the city of Lafayette. And what they found here is that even the poor neighborhoods of the city, when denser than the more suburban affluent areas at the edges of the city, were creating a profit in terms of tax revenue for the city, and were unnecessarily subsidizing the less dense affluent areas at the edge of the community, sort of draining those dense, financially productive, and low-income parts of the city of their resources. And the reason this happens is because of the amount of infrastructure per capita required to build different kinds of development patterns. The United States has the fourth largest amount of pavement per capita of any country in the world, and we lead in other areas as well, such as water infrastructure and miles driven per person or per essential city service, and length of electrical wires per capita, and other things like this that really create an extra infrastructure burden unnecessarily upon city government and upon the residents of a community such as Syracuse when we develop in a less dense, more suburban manner. And we see these costs here are quite stark with the suburban development pattern costing much more to maintain at the city level than the urban development pattern. And this has huge ramifications for affordable housing, because when we develop in the suburban development pattern, we have less money left over for creation of new affordable housing funded by government, and we also have higher taxes imposed either directly on affordable housing homeowners or indirectly on affordable housing renters through an increase in their rent necessitated by increased taxes upon their landlords. And while we have many different types of productive land use in terms of value per acre with dense urban development and productive farmland, what over the past century or half a century has really happened in a lot of communities, including Syracuse and other cities such as Buffalo, is even as the population has remained stagnant in areas such as Buffalo here, the urbanized area within the county and metro area has expanded greatly in a suburbanized development pattern with a stagnant population. And this is both taking away land from productive land uses such as dense urbanism and farmland, and is also draining those areas of their financial productivity by taking away government spending resources on an unnecessarily large amount of infrastructure per capita. This is a trend happening throughout the entire country and should be a concern both to cities and rural lands. And as a result of this, we can have dense urbanism, which is productive and cheaper to build per capita, which really has great ramifications for creating affordable housing. We can have this side by side with priceless, untouched natural land and intact farmland, including solar and wind farms that are quite productive land uses. Or if we have too much suburban sprawl thrown into the mix, the land use and tax structure and spending structure becomes financially unproductive and also takes away from potential use of the land for other productive uses. And one of the reasons this is happening, among many other reasons, is zoning in Syracuse. And these are two side-by-side maps of the Westcott neighborhood of Syracuse. On the left, we see all of the different multifamily, small 3 or 4 unit buildings, 2 to 4 unit buildings in Westcott. And the ones in red are sort of grandfathered in with the existing zoning code, and they wouldn't be allowed to be built today anymore if the zoning code remained constant. And on the right, you see which of these small apartment buildings in the Westcott area would remain. And these buildings are much more affordable of housing than the other housing in the neighborhood, which is single family. And if the zoning code is not updated, then we prevent ourselves from being able to provide new, dense, affordable housing in neighborhoods such as Westcott and other neighborhoods around Syracuse. And we also risk losing some of the existing affordable housing stock once it becomes obsolete. Thankfully, Syracuse is going through a process of rethinking its zoning code and is densifying the potential for new development in many areas of the city. And this is more important now than ever because of climate change. And if we look to the future, by 2080, Syracuse, as well as much of the northern part of the United States, is expected to receive an increase in population due to warming and the South becoming less habitable. And in order to prepare for this, we have to upzone the entirety of Syracuse, or at least many of its districts, to allow for an increase in population without sprawling outwards and creating financially unproductive land uses while losing our farmland and natural land. And this is also more important than ever for Syracuse's fiscal solvency, as we need a financially productive development pattern to offset what Syracuse typically has as a strained budget, and also now more than ever with the coronavirus, the budget is even more under strain here and could be for the foreseeable future. And as we're using the benefits of this development pattern and the extra funds and resources that we have to remedy some of the wrongs of the past, we should be using an economically productive density to build new affordable housing so that we can afford to build more housing for more people. And that affordable housing can look like this. It can be apartment buildings such as this one recently constructed in Syracuse as new affordable housing. Or it can also be something like this, which currently exists in Syracuse as row houses, which are not quite as efficient as apartment buildings, but are much more efficient than single family homes. And in terms of housing being affordable, it also has to be, it also has to have low maintenance costs. And row houses and apartment buildings can save a lot on energy because of shared walls. And a single family home certainly has more walls that heat is leaking out of, costing potentially more in terms of energy for a low income affordable housing residents of an affordable single family home, which would become more expensive than something built in this development pattern. Another major concern for affordable housing is parking. In order for housing to truly be affordable to build and to live in, we have to build communities that are car optional and don't have parking spaces dedicated for apartment units. This is a drawing for a block in Charleston, South Carolina, showing a fairly affordable method of building housing that creates a decent density at low cost. And when you bring parking into the mix, you get something like this. And this is much more expensive to build, and even housing with surface level parking lots, that's also much more expensive to build than this much more affordable construction that doesn't have to consider the fact of constructing parking spaces or parking garages. And in addition to this, it's not only more expensive to construct housing that contains spaces for cars, but also the cost of owning a car is quite expensive for the affordable housing resident. And by creating walkable and transit communities that have less need for a car, we decrease the cost of living for cash-strapped affordable housing residents, allowing them to spend more of their income on other things, including housing, making housing more attainable for them. And getting away from car dependence is also quite important in terms of sustainability, as it's one of the least efficient forms of transportation, less efficient than train. Reducing car dependency has an important environmental impact as well, due to energy efficiency and emissions. And additionally, residents of affordable housing in Syracuse should have access to low business startup costs for creating small businesses within their communities. And in terms of business startup costs, rent is a major factor. And in places like the mall in Syracuse and also strip malls such as this one, in terms of rent, maintaining parking lots is counted into the rent and can really increase the cost of starting up a business in the community. And creating more walkable development that focuses on an economically productive development pattern and does not require maintenance of parking to be subsidized by commercial rent, can make starting a small business much more attainable to low income and affordable housing residents. And other benefits of this development pattern for business startup costs include even cheaper ways to start small businesses such as trucks and carts that require the foot traffic provided by this development pattern, and the ability to start small businesses and attain the startup costs for those businesses is essential for economic opportunity for those in affordable housing. Also, in terms of creating this dense affordable housing in Syracuse, we have to consider creating more public spaces that are more readily accessible to everyone to create a sense of community and to compensate for the loss of the individual backyard as we're creating multifamily dwellings and row houses. And all of this has the potential to really tie together Syracuse better, create a larger, more walkable core of the city that's car optional, while really integrating neighborhoods into each other and blurring the boundaries between neighborhoods to create more access to opportunity and to create less segregation by removing the boundaries between areas currently inhabited by those with different demographics and income levels. And in order to create a car optional city, we have to really prioritize the pedestrian in terms of our infrastructure, widening sidewalks, narrowing streets, creating more street trees and parklets, and bringing the buildings right up to the sidewalk can really have a great impact on our neighborhoods. And additionally, when affordable housing is built, it should be seamlessly integrated into the surrounding community This is an example from Cincinnati when public and affordable housing was built in a way that's very similar to some of the existing neighborhoods, blending the boundaries between areas of affordable and low income housing and residents to integrate them with more market rate areas of the city and make people feel, of all demographics, feel welcome in all areas and make them feel like they're a part of the city instead of some alternate reality within the city. And building affordable housing requires that for financial reasons, it requires that the construction of the affordable housing has a fantastic return on investment, and we simply don't always see that with affordable housing, which is sometimes built cheaply or is sometimes built in a way that is not beloved by the community and therefore won't necessarily be taken care of as well and may not last as long. And here we see a comparison of two different developments in Syracuse, one of which has been with us for quite some time, and the other is the Kennedy Square housing development that was only around for a few decades before it was demolished in the northeastern corner of the 15th ward. And in order for housing to be affordable, its return on investment has to span the greatest number of years possible to, in the long run, give affordable housing to as many people as possible. Additionally, areas of housing shouldn't just be housing. They should be integrated well with civic uses such as markets and community centers, libraries, schools, health clinics, other things to really give everyone access to essential services in affordable housing areas that are often far from those services in the current condition of the city. And the benefits of good urban design create affordability, resilience, quality of life, and health benefits. And in terms of policy, the first thing I would propose is that subsidization of affordable and public housing is much more feasible with a financially productive development pattern that saves governments money and is cheaper to build new housing within this development pattern, allowing for more funding for affordable housing and more affordable housing built per dollar spent. In terms of Blueprint 15, we have to be careful about increasing the number of affordable units and mixed use within the Blueprint 15 area when the public housing is redeveloped. And I bring up this concern because the organization associated with Blueprint 15, Purpose-Built Communities, has redeveloped public housing across the country, creating neighborhoods such as this one you see in the picture here. And often what they've done is in rebuilding the housing, they've decreased the overall number of units while turning some into market rate units, creating a lot of displacement. And we have to really hold Blueprint 15 accountable to not create displacement when they redevelop the affordable housing and public housing in Syracuse. Another important policy is land value tax. This is instituted in several cities across America, mostly in Pennsylvania, such as Harrisburg, which is shown here. And land value tax basically only taxes land at the value of the land and its location and size itself, and does not tax the value of the improvements upon the land, such as built structures. And this is important because the current property tax system in places like Syracuse and most of America incentivizes land speculation on empty plots of land that are taxed at much lower rates than plots of land that have buildings on them, which makes those lands go undeveloped for many years and decreases the amount of new housing stock that's being built. Also, in declining neighborhoods with low rents, it is often cheaper for landlords to, in the current property tax system in Syracuse and other cities, to tear down existing buildings to lower their property taxes and replace those buildings with parking lots. And land value tax does not decrease taxes by tearing down a building, and therefore prevents those tear downs from occurring. Additionally, land value tax in Harrisburg here has created, due to these factors, a city in which you don't see a lot of vacant and empty lots in and around the downtown in this picture. And then if you look to Syracuse instead, you find that with the typical American property tax system that we do have here, you see a lot of parking lots and vacant lots and underutilized lots that may be more likely filled with new housing, including affordable housing under land value tax system. Additionally, this doesn't necessarily occur on the local level. This has to probably occur on the state or national level, but there has to be reparations for urban renewal, redlining, racial covenants, and urban highways that destroyed once vibrant neighborhoods like the 15th Ward, which were full of affordable housing, and turned them into places like this picture here, which is the former site of the Kennedy Square housing development. Zoning is also very important, and while the Rezone Syracuse efforts certainly increases the housing capacity in neighborhoods across the city in building all kinds of housing, including affordable housing, several cities across the country, including just recently Minneapolis, have abolished single-family zoning citywide, which in the map of Minneapolis that you see here is depicted in pink. And those areas now can, instead of containing one family per lot of land, are allowed to house 3 to 4 families per lot of land. And this drastically increases the housing capacity, especially of building affordable housing in neighborhoods that are typically more affluent within the city of Minneapolis. And Syracuse could use a policy like this as well. Another place that has created positive zoning reforms is Vermont, and statewide they've recently instituted policy that encourages density in already dense areas and existing town centers while protecting farmland and natural land. And this provides more capacity for building affordable housing in a more financially productive development pattern across Vermont, while preserving land and by creating that more affordable and productive land use pattern can increase government revenues and can provide more funds at the state and local level for creating new affordable housing. And throughout all this, also decreases cost of living due to less need of automobiles. And having discussed earlier that parking incorporated with new housing really drives up the cost of building housing, 2 cities in America have recently abolished parking minimums, which require a minimum number of parking spaces per residential or other type of unit. And this results in a ridiculously large amount of parking, even in some of the most walkable and car optional neighborhoods across America. And these 2 cities, which have a lot of similarities to Syracuse, have been able to remove their parking minimums, and Syracuse, as a very walkable city and potentially even more walkable city in the future, can really do to remove its parking minimums and allow more housing to be built for less cost. Our parking minimums in Syracuse have already prevented lots of projects from being built, such as this building in Westcott, which was not economically feasible without, was not economically feasible with the current parking minimums, which ultimately resulted in the city not allowing this project to go forward. Also, in terms of zoning, a subtle way to introduce density and affordable housing in neighborhoods is something called missing middle housing, which ranges from duplexes to fourplexes to townhomes to live-work units. And this can really inject a lot of density and affordability in a very palatable way into neighborhoods, as can allowing things like affordable accessory dwelling units behind every home and allowing accessory commercial units, both of which increase affordability of living in neighborhoods and access to resources, while allowing the owners of a house to afford more house, making those houses that have supplementary income attached to them more affordable. And now I'm just going to run quickly through some images of my thesis relating to a lot of the ideas from this presentation. This is the current condition of the northern part of the 15th ward in Syracuse, and this is the change with the community grid implemented. And then throughout the various phases of my project, I've created improvements to the streetscapes, new buildings, new public spaces, ultimately resulting in a more dense and complete and pedestrian-friendly neighborhood that can contain a lot of new housing, including affordable housing, and can really tie together the surrounding neighborhoods that are very segregated from each other at the moment. This can really create a lot of opportunity and interconnected complete communities while creating the economically productive development pattern that I've been discussing throughout this presentation. And then just to show some images of what that could visually look like, most of these are on Washington Street in the northern part of the former 15th ward. Here you see the I-81 Viaduct converted into the community grid. This is a conversion of the former A&M church into a neighborhood school, putting civic assets straight into communities of affordable housing. And here's just a few more images. This one of the new community center. This one showing a market on the left, similar to the Central New York Regional Market. And then this one near the Erie student apartment building, showing new buildings that are much more fine-grained. And if you're interested in some of the ideas that I've touched upon during this presentation, I draw a lot from these four organizations here and the book, The Color of Law, which, if you have any interest, these could be great resources. Please let me know if you have any questions, although we might want to save the questions for the end since I think we're running a bit late.
Dan Carroll had something that a comment that he wanted to make. Dan, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah,
Can you unmute yourself, Dan?
I think we should move. Can we move on?
Oh, here we go. Yep. So I was just going to say, in regard to the native plants, I'm wondering what the what your intentions are as far as native plants and species of plants, instead of just, you know, anything that's more of an invasive species. I think it's important I mean, because it's the groundwork, and if you don't set it straight in the beginning, it'll be wrong for millennia.
Are you referring to the images such as these that I included?
So these are native species of plants, and they're all integrated in. I think it's great if that's your intention.
It was my intention. I mean, I don't think I did as much research for the plants in the planter boxes and the parklets, but I made sure that I can't remember what type of tree it is, but I looked into what kinds of trees are the most common street trees in Syracuse, and I used one of those throughout my project.
Yeah, that's encouraging, because we miss that as residences, and it's not part of this conversation, but I think that it's important to keep the natural native birds and species here, and that makes us special, right? How about go Cardinals, or I mean Blue Jays, or whatever.
Yeah, well, thanks. I think that's a good conversation, a good overlay for this. But I mean, maybe for a future presentation, we can cover those kind of issues. I'd like to keep things moving a little bit. And Dan from SACPA. So I'm gonna work towards trying to get us finished by about 1:30. Hopefully the group can have a chance to have a little discussion at the end, but I figure that Dan will take about 10 or so minutes, and then we'll give Sharon some time to speak. So Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you, and if you need your slides, Diane can, oh, there, she's already sent it over to you. Thanks, Diane.
All right, thank you. Hope everybody can hear me okay. Baxter, that is a great presentation. Man, you really packed a lot. That's a great project, and you know, the visioning that you have in there is a great addition to the things that we've been getting from DOT, I would say. So, which, you know, obviously they're focused on the transportation system at this point, but it gives us something really interesting to shoot for in the future, especially the development community. So I'm going to keep this relatively brief, but I will actually say something about the native plants, just really quick. In the rezone document, if you look at it online on the city zoning website, in our development standards, please check me, but I believe that we do somewhere in there require native species. Also, we've worked very closely with the city's arborist, Steve Harris, an old friend of mine, and he is actually putting together some very specific tree standards. And I will note that the very well-known planner, Dwayne, who worked on the lakefront zoning, I noticed that there were a lot of actually invasive species that were included in the code that we have there, and we've been trying to change that over the years. So you're right, if you don't get it right from the beginning, that's what you'll end up with. Japanese barberry and all those other wonderful things. So rezone, it's been going on for, I think, close to 5 years now. But last December, we produced a final document for adoption. And one of the reasons that we did that was to develop and release our scoping document for our seeker process, which is going to be a generic environmental impact statement. So December 2019, we released that scoping document, which looks at the potential long-term environmental impacts of rezone. And we received a lot of comments, mostly positive, but one of the big ones that we got was on equity and affordable housing. So in the last 6 months or so, we've been very busy working, and my whole department has been working throughout the entire pandemic, whether from home or whatever. The Planning Commission hasn't missed a beat, nor has the BZA. But we have worked very, very hard with Michael Collins and common councilors to put together and incorporate some affordable housing provisions. I can't really speak to specifics today, but I will in a minute talk about what the general approach is, just because we're still in the midst of working out those details. And very soon we're going to be going out to the housing community and developers to kind of review those and see how they're received, and then make any changes that we need to make. So that has really been the thrust. There's just that and another policy change that we're looking to make within the document, which we fairly anticipated, but it has, you know, I mean, it definitely was a big piece to kind of take on within 6 months. So I would rather give it a year or two because it is a very important issue that I know a lot of people care about. But we're trying to be responsive, and common councilors are very motivated to incorporate something, especially concerning affordable housing, into the law. So our real target at this point is early 2021 for adoption, which means that we'll have to have a final draft of the zoning law and map by the end of this year, by December. And one of the important companion pieces will be that draft generic environmental impact statement. And that is really the current status of rezone right now. We have the policy initiatives pretty well worked out. The map is pretty well set, and we're really moving into adoption phase. There's you know, some common councilors that are very anxious to get this adopted and move forward with it. So with that, you know, I've written lots of different kinds of zoning code, form-based code, hybrid code, traditional as a consultant and as a town planner. You know, zoning, you start with the areas that you want to see in your community, and then you put those on paper, you figure out, you know, the form, the performance, all these things actually that Baxter kind of encapsulated in his presentation. And then you apply them to the map where they are or where you want them to be. That's kind of a basic design-based approach to zoning. And of course, there's a lot more to that, but I only have 5 or 10 minutes. in this area that Baxter focused on, we have the connective corridor. Obviously, we have the 81 project, and whatever eventually will happen there. We have the university. We have our employment centers. It's a very important area to the city. So what kind of evolved over time, and starting with the comprehensive plan for the city, was identifying what areas you want to be what kind of character areas you want to create. And largely, the 81 corridor right now in rezone is MX4 and MX5. So MX stands for mixed use. And the city has many, many, many more zoning districts now than it will when rezone is adopted. And I'm only going to talk about the mixed use districts. So they range from MX1 to MX5. MX1 is kind of that accessory commercial use that Baxter showed a slide of. It's utilizing these larger, older homes and having some flexibility as far as multifamily uses, small commercial uses, and kind of giving the opportunity for those small scale commercial operations that can occur in some of these larger buildings that we have, these legacy buildings that we have. MX2 is more like your Westcott district, your James Street and Elmwood, your South Ave. It's your kind of your current walkable neighborhood downtown. Some of these areas, South Salina Street, to a certain extent, are your old neighborhood downtowns. Okay, sometimes they were former villages, right? So those I think we're all pretty well familiar with, and MX2 districts have unique challenges. Actually, Baxter spoke to this very well with parking. And even if we waive parking, we still live in a society where largely people have an expectation to have a car, or at least use a car share, or at least store a car someplace. And then if you have commercial businesses, obviously the more residences you can place in these areas, the more feet on the ground you have without having to drive there. And so that helps the commercial areas, but you're still going to have people that are driving into the areas. So one of the things that's very sensitive in those areas is, all right, so we waive parking, but then as parking spreads out in the neighborhood on the streets, how does that affect the street? How does that affect the neighborhood and those types of things? So MX2s are probably our most sensitive environmentally mixed use districts. MX3 is an interesting district. It's our transition zone. So these are areas that have a lot of different mixes of uses now, or they're largely vacant. So think of your West Street, your Erie Boulevard on the southern side, areas where you might have a retail store, a restaurant, and a oxygen supply business. So you have largely commercial, retail. You have kind of a mix of uses, not a lot of residential necessarily. And those are areas that we're waiting to see what happens. How will developers change those areas, and kind of giving them the opportunity within that zone to have a lot of flexibility. And then as those areas, either through planning or through development, or both preferably, how they develop, you can shift the zoning to kind of fit what the trend is there. And finally, we get to the area, the zones that really affect the area that we're talking about in the 81 Viaduct corridor, and those are the MX4 and MX5. MX4 is kind of the areas right near downtown and right near the university. So those are in the zoning law. We use minimum stories in the rezone. So those are minimum story of 3 stories. So anything new that's built in those areas has to be at least 3 stories tall. And that really gets towards what Baxter had described in his presentation. And then in the MX4 district, I'm just keeping this as simple as possible. But in the MX4 districts, you have a minimum of 3 stories, but you have a maximum of 8. So this isn't the place to put your 20-story tower, but it is, we still want a significant building, a significant type of development there. And then there's all land uses and development standards that go along with that. MX5 is your downtown zone. This is where we want the larger buildings. This is a minimum of 3 stories, and there's no cap. So you can go as tall as you need to. And then that has its own set of development standards and use regulations that go along with it. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this law rezone incorporates specific development standards for each zone and for different land uses. So that has to do with landscaping, it has to do with parking, how parking appears, and how you treat the site in order to incorporate into the neighborhood, as well as to make it attractive and high value development. And those are very extensive in rezone, but there's still some flexibility built in there. So as far as because this is focused on affordable housing, I will say I'll just say for now that we have kind of a three-pronged approach. And the first is an incentive-based approach. So what we're looking at when we talk about affordable housing with rezone, we're not talking about subsidized housing projects that qualify for any kind of HUD subsidies. Let's just keep it simple like that, which we have a lot of in the city. And we have a lot of great not-for-profit organizations that do that type of work. And you know, our MBD office in the city does, you know, a great job with that. And we've, you know, that rezone doesn't really, you know, we don't really need to do a whole lot to kind of keep that effort going. And if there is something we need to do, let me know. But what we're looking at, what we try to target is taking these newer projects that are largely market-based and incorporating a mix of incomes. So it's often called a mixed income project. And these are at least, normally the guidance is that they're at least 50% market rate. And then they can be anywhere from 10, you know, to 50% affordable or mixed income. And now that affordable is generally a range of 80% annual median income to about 120% annual median income. So you're really targeting people that are working, people that are, you know, that have an income, that want to live near where they work, they want to live in certain areas, they want a newer apartment. And this provides those opportunities, you know, within buildings that are being built, you know, multifamily buildings, whether it's mixed use or only multifamily, and you provide or you create within them a range of affordable units that really target kind of that missing middle that Baxter spoke to. And you do it in a way that you can't tell that they're affordable housing. So, and then so that is what we talk about when we talk about affordable housing and rezone, and what we're working on right now. So we have incentives to create that, but there's also counter counselors wanted to see what a regulatory requirement would look like. So we are working on that, like kind of a minimum requirement for projects. And then the third prong to the whole thing is a trust fund. So the trust fund, one of the things that we're building in is an offset. So if we have a regulatory requirement and, you know, you say, you know, I can do half of that, but I'll give you, you know, we'll pay the other half into the trust fund. What that does is that creates a fund for the city to fund other sorts of affordable housing projects that aren't being built by the development community, or they can subsidize what people want to build in the development community, but it doesn't work out in their pro forma. And I think as far as other planning efforts related to the 15th ward, we're really letting Blueprint 15, you know, see what they come up with and see what they come out with. And we're also, of course, until DOT gets a little bit farther along, you know, which we're getting there, you know, we'll see what happens. The other thing is we have to get through this rezone, and then really rezone is an end to a long project, but it's also the beginning. So it's someplace, it's a jumping off point for other projects and other refinement to rezone into land use policies in the city that will further the development everybody wants to see.
Thank you very much, Dan. Let's move right on to Shannon, and I'll just remind everybody, if there are some questions, put them in the chat box so we can take them when they come up. If you just want to say you have a question and not write the question, feel free to do that, but just so we can call on you. So Shannon, turn it over to you.
Shannon, do you have anything you wanted to share on your screen with us? We can't hear you. Okay, we should be able to hear you now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I feel like I'm in that commercial. Can you hear me now? Good. Yeah, I can. Can I?
You want me to? All right.
Yeah, that would be.
Let me make you the presenter, and then you can share your screen.
Okay. I just have just handful of things I want to go through quick.
Okay. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little icon that says screen, and you need to click on that.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm going to try to touch it as little as possible because this is a totally new kind of format. But hi, my name is Shannon Fabiani. Thank you for the introduction earlier, John, and thank you to Greening USA for giving me a little bit of airtime here. So I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension in Onondaga County. I'm the Clean Energy Advisor. I deliver NYSERDA's Smart Energy Choices program, which is the page that we can see here. Can you see my mouse, like me scrolling it? Okay. Oh, okay. Now I see my little, okay. Sorry, guys. But the Smart Energy Choices program is kind of an umbrella term for a lot of the different funding opportunities and financing opportunities for clean energy transition that New York State offers. Some of them may be familiar to you guys. Empower New York, Weatherization Assistance Program, WAP, and a couple of the community solar programs. But I honestly saw this presentation like 2 weeks ago that Baxter is presenting, that this is being hosted, and I was like, can I get on really quick? And because I think there's a lot of overlap that I would love to have like a second presentation on how, if anyone was interested, on how these funding opportunities can be used to complement not just the community grid and the redevelopment of the 15th ward, but our community just in general and at large planning. So the Smart Energy Choices program, basically what community energy advisors do, and Extension likes to have a lot of different titles. So through NYSERDA, I'm a clean energy advisor, but my extension title is a community energy educator. So you see two different things, it's both. But so basically my role is to help anyone that is paying their utility bills, whether it's a landlord, a tenant, property owner, small business farms. I think John went through the list earlier. Connect them to the home energy audit, which is free no matter what your income level is. And it's actually, they say nothing in life is free. It's technically not free. You pay a monthly services benefit charge, SBC, on your utility bill. And that small percentage goes into these funding programs. So you're kind of paying for it. But basically, the first step is an energy audit. We see where we can save you money, save you energy. So things like insulation, leaks, kind of what can we fix that's currently there? How can, change your windows and stuff like that? How can we really keep that heat in and keep it cool? So that's the first step. And then the second step is to try to get homeowners, property owners to transition to clean energy, whether that's a heat pump, ground source, air source heat pump, or community solar. So those are kind of the steps. It goes audit, which anyone can get no matter your income level, then renewable heat transition and solar transition. We target low to moderate income households. I won't get into all of those different brackets because they recently just changed as well with COVID, but basically if you make under 120% of the median state income, you are eligible. It was a private chat, sorry. So it's a really incredible program, the Smart Energy Choices. There's a lot of different options for people, and I think honestly, this is homework for me. I've got to figure out how this program can complement the community grid and the redevelopment. I think there's a lot of different ways, from bottom up, incorporating inherently clean energy technologies into buildings. I mean, I see a lot, I think here, a lot of surfaces that we could put, I think these are some of the renderings, a lot of surfaces we could put solar on. And yeah, I get excited seeing a lot of these spaces, but sorry. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities, and I think the one that I just kind of want to emphasize on right now is the contractors that do the work. So there are NYSERDA certified contractors. When I started this position like 2 months ago, and when I started, the first thing I did was look into what is the overlap between MWBE certified contractors and NYSERDA certified contractors. And there's only two. There's only two that overlap in Onondaga and Oswego County. So I would love to see local contractors being able to get those certifications. Sorry, I just got distracted by a question. But how do we from the start include local contractors and make the people in the community a part of this from the ground up? I'm just going to answer that question that I see. How do we require or set minimum clean energy requirements in the development? I don't have that answer, so I'm not going to speak to that. But okay, no, this is Dan. I do want to. I'm going to just wrap up. I wanted to just share a couple of what I do. You can see this website has a really great breakdown of what the different programs are, the different tiers by the different income levels. But I think that this presentation is about creating affordable and equitable housing. And I want to emphasize the critical importance of incorporating the community instead of prescribing solutions for them. Not saying that anyone's doing that, but it's a lot of the time communities are told what they think is best for them. And continuing to make sure that we are actively involving the community that we are working with and want to lift is really important to remember. And similar to during any kind of issue, there's a tragedy, natural event, you see a sense of community that forms. How can we capitalize on the sense of community that's going to form out of the transition from what we have now to a community grid and make that sustainable after the transitions are done? So I'm going to end talking right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. That was, very stimulating in terms of, what we need to be looking at and doing here. It prompted me to ask a couple of questions, like maybe to the planning agency so. Is there an opportunity to create, maybe an overlay district or some added requirements for certain districts in the city, like this blueprint, like the 15th Ward developments, that could put some higher standards in place, not only for affordable housing, but for clean energy? So maybe that's a question. There's a lot of good information. I want to thank Baxter for his presentation. It was an incredible compilation of ideas. I would love to see you. I don't know if this is in writing any place to have for people to digest, but I think there's a lot of things in there that we can draw from as we go forward. So I want to compliment you on that work. Are there some questions here? I see a lot of long comments. Ben Schultz just posted a long comment there. I don't know if Ben, if you want to be unmuted and speak for a second or two? I don't know if Diane
Sure.
has to unmute. Could you just identify yourself and say what you were?
Yeah, my name is Ben Schultz. I'm a Maxwell student, getting my MPA, and really enjoyed the discussion today. It was very enlightening. Baxter, that was a fantastic presentation. And I can draw a lot of connections between what's happening here in Syracuse, and I'm from San Francisco originally, and some of the discussion in the community happening there. And I'm just curious if anyone has any projections on just what the traffic management will look like on Almond Street after they tear down the viaduct. I'm sure the community is going to flourish. In San Francisco, we had a similar, very divisive viaduct with the 101 that was torn down, and it's been wonderful having it not there. But there's been increased traffic, on the on the boulevard and the ground level streets. And I'm just curious if anyone can provide a little insight into that.
I don't know who might be the best one to respond to. Maybe Dan.
Well, I mean, if you read the draft preliminary, whatever it is, from the DOT, traffic is going to flow right through. I mean, it's going to be, you're going to go from 65 to 30, and then everything's just going to flow just fine all the way through. And I got to be careful here because I do work with these people every day. I am on the committee of the MPO. But there's nothing I haven't said before. It's a concern for me as a planner. I think, and I agree, Baxter's presentation really shows the potential for that area, with a grid. But there's a couple things. So DOT is really trying to maintain some type of thoroughfare through there, which they did in the 60s as well. In this plan, right? Community renewal plan that tore down all the neighborhoods and put the highway in. So, but back then they said, well, geez, we can't do that to the city. We got to elevate the highway because how are people going to walk around and how are we going to maintain this urban fabric? And now we're saying, well, we're going to tear it down and we're going to have an urban fabric with a highway going through the middle of it. And I don't know how that's going to work. So I think it's an excellent question. Presumably you will reroute a lot of traffic around, on 481, which will become 81, but you still have your largest employment centers in downtown and university in the county that people need to get to. And it would be great, I have lots of ideas for all kinds of mass transit in the city and in the county, but people are still going to drive their car, and they are choosing to move into the city and downtown, and the more attractive places we can make for them to move there, maybe the less traffic we'll have. Let's face it, we're still Americans. We still love our cars, and so how that traffic on that road is really going to affect that urban fabric, I think, is a very key question, and I don't think anybody's answered it yet. Except maybe, I just don't want us to repeat the mistakes of the past. I have countywide projects right now where we're working in villages and town centers where the mayors and the town supervisors are like, we want to have more commercial activity. We want to keep our communities walkable, and we can't because we have a state route that's going through it, and there's a lot of traffic, and it's not managed at a village scale. And I fear that not only on Almond Street, but on Clinton and Salina, if that's where they're going to divert traffic to, then that's just that much more traffic through the middle of the city. So, what we do about that, I think, has to come from the community. And, studies like Baxter's and, there's a lot of different visions for what this corridor could be. And I think at some point, if the community doesn't decide in some consensual way what they want to see there in the future, I'm really afraid of what will end up there.
Yeah, well, thank you for the response. I definitely don't want to come off as sounding like a NIMBY because I'm totally for tearing down the viaduct. I think the community renewal or new community renewal plan post viaduct, I think it's great, but was just curious. So thank you so much for the answer.
Thanks for the question. Good one. Unmute Baxter.
I see Bob Haley has raised his hand.
Yeah, thanks. No, I'm just appreciative for this whole discussion, and certainly to Dan and Baxter and Shannon, and to address the question about what's it going to be like on the street on Almond Street. We're still trying to understand that. We've had a highway through the center of our city that brought in all of our traffic really as a commuter feeder to our center of our city. And now we're trying to recapture the quality of place of the center of our city, which I think Dan mentioned that the towns and villages want. So it's still up into the air as to the quality of the streetscape that's still trying to do half of the job, maybe, or less than half of the job of the previous I-81. I really enjoyed Baxter's vision about quality of place in the sense of the old patterns of how dense the city used to be with housing and complexity. And what Dan followed up with is how really much effort has to go into the rezone to deal with increasing the diversity of housing in this new center of our city because of changing transportation. Unfortunately, Syracuse doesn't have a regional transit to help lift some of the population that would prefer to use it to get to work. So we go back to what Syracuse has, which is mostly cars, and we're used to cars and we want to get to places quick. And back to Shannon's point, she's, I think, desperately trying to get all of the forward moving energy efficiencies into the new affordable housing and into every plan, which would go to how these projects are being funded. That would require, the New York State codes, energy codes require efficiencies, and these are the techniques that are used. But the funding sources or the agency can raise the bar incrementally to get more energy efficient systems into these projects. It's so many things going on, but essentially right now is we have a transportation plan going through our city without a large development kind of energy to help pick us up and do all the rest that everybody's speaking to. And I just thank you for all of your efforts in this discussion.
Thanks, Bob. I think, having hopefully Greening USA can continue with follow-up discussions on this. There's a lot of stuff to unpack here to work on. Now, does Shireen have your hand up? Did you want to make a comment, or was I just mistaken?
No, I did want to make a comment. I'm Ram Srivastava from Larson Engineers. I'm in Rochester, New York. And most of our work now for the last 10 years is sustainability and green design. So I compliment Baxter for what he has presented. We need to make these cities living cities with community interaction and less dependence on having 2 cars per family, perhaps 1 car or maybe just a membership in one of those rider clubs, and you go to the bus station or train station or whatever. So the future can be a lot brighter with green technology, and I believe the coming funding for infrastructure will have some special consideration for green design, and we certainly love to do that kind of stuff and bring new hope. Shannon talked about energy. That's a very key factor in climate issues, which will be coming up soon, that we need to address climate change. So let's make these communities net zero. Let's use the brownfield sites and contaminated sites that are sitting there and nobody's going to build housing on it as a host for solar farms. We have investors who are willing to invest and build these farms and sell you power for 10% lower than what you're paying. So there is no capital investment. So we're looking for people who have such sites to sell it or lease it to us, and then we can provide net zero type of situation for these low medium income housing. So that's the point I wanted to make.
Thank you very much for that. And I don't know if somebody else, you can either raise your hand on the screen, I'll see you, or put it in the chat if you want to talk, or maybe unmute yourself and I can notice that. So Dan, I guess one of my overall questions is, aside from the zoning plan, is SACPA planning to have a sort of a strategic plan to deal with housing, affordable housing, rehabilitation of housing, and incorporation of renewable energy into the landscape? Is there going to be a guideline document that will be available, or is there one, or will there be one that we will have to guide what we do?
That's a great question. With regard to affordable housing, especially, one of the things that my team and I and common counselors and we all agree on is that, it's great if we can incorporate these things into rezone now, and the development community, the community itself, accepts that, and we can move forward with some aggressive policies there. But we always, every meeting I have, I always remind everybody that, we don't have a housing plan. We don't have an affordable housing plan, let alone a housing plan. And we need one. And, we might, it might take a couple of years, or just like any planning effort, put some money towards it and have a real concise housing plan that really tells us what we have, what we need, where the gaps are. And we might, as far as zoning goes, we might spend 2 years studying it and come right back to what we have on the table right now that we're working on. But that's fine, because what it does is the planning process alone gets that information out to people. We have a conversation about it. We share information. We talk to each other, and then we kind of, everybody can see like, oh, okay, this was done, not in a vacuum, not from the top down, but from all the great partners that we have in the community that are working on this and that care about this, and we have a concise policy, and we can all see that yes, these are the numbers, we agree on them, and these are where the gaps are, and this is what we should be working toward. Now, I will say, with the approach that we're doing right now with the rezone, we built in some flexibility that neighborhood and business development can use, so that the zoning itself is just the pathway. It's the buildable allowance, right? And that's the basic requirement. But what those income levels are, what percentage of AMI can shift on an annual or even quicker basis as MBD gets more information, as they see that they need things more at the 110% or the 80%, or depending on what neighborhood you're in. And so we're kind of building in a more flexible model that doesn't involve amending the entire zoning law in order to kind of change and target it, as you go along. As far as the energy efficiency part, it's actually interesting. Before, this was years ago, a friend of mine, works for a not-for-profit, and he builds subsidized housing projects, and he had a site, and he was telling me about it, and I said, man, that was really right for solar. Even if it was a hot water heater, and you could provide, basically free heat, to these folks that don't have the income to really pay a heating bill, and that would free up that income, to do other things. And he was all for it, but his developer, his partner in development, the builder, just would not have it. They just didn't get it. And so, yeah, I think that there is room and there is a need to have some kind of basic requirement, even if it's determined by the building site, and type and size and those types of things. I mean, you can narrow it in, but I do think that there is room and there is a need to require it, because these are the people that, we talked about transportation a lot today because of 81, but those transportation costs, if you're paying 70% of your income to rent, there's not anything left over for a car, and there's probably not a whole lot left over for electric and gas. So, the more, you can save people on those utilities, even middle class or upper class, I think the statistic is they're 9 times more likely to spend it locally. So that supports those local businesses you're trying to support as well. And of course, it helps the individual out too, their bottom line.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I'll say I think Greening USA, stands ready to help create the momentum, I guess, for you to get the funding and permission to create a housing plan. So anything that we can do to work together to help see that happen, I think it would be an important step forward for the community, and to pull together a coalition of people that would sort of lobby to see such a plan be created. I suppose there's maybe one more thing that you can tell us. So if people want to look at the documents, the rezone documents, to get ready to review it and provide comments or whatever they have to do during the environmental review phase, how can they do that?
You can go right to the City of Syracuse's website, and they're on the rezone project page, which I think there's a link right on the front page of Syracuse.gov or Syr.gov.
Okay, well, it's a little bit after 1:30. I don't see any other burning issues or people waving to try to speak. I suppose it's appropriate for me now to say thank you to our panelists. It was a great discussion. Thank you for our audience being here today and helping us out. And we'll look forward to seeing you on, I guess I said October 13th, if I'm not mistaken, talk about parklets. So thank you very much, and thanks, Diane, for controlling the system today.
Just barely. Baxter,
Thanks, everybody.
I just unmuted you if you wanted to say a final word.
Thank you. There was one last thing that I had forgotten to mention that I tried to mention before and didn't realize I was muted. So in terms of some people have mentioned concerns of the car being the main mode of transportation in Syracuse and the surrounding areas. And in terms of transit and sustainability in the future around transportation, I am very hopeful for Syracuse. Even if you look at the current statistics about Syracuse, this city continually falls within the top 15 cities in the country for lowest car ownership rates and for largest number of people who walk to work. So we're already at a good starting point here, and we have the right infrastructure and layout of our community to be able to move forward with this as an advantage over some of other cities that don't have the same starting point that we have.
Great, thank you for that information.
Thank you.
So long, everybody. We'll see you next month. Keep wearing those masks and be safe.
Thank you.
I see Peter's been wearing his today, so it's a good advertisement for it. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Melanie.
Diane, you want to take the record off?
Oh yeah, good idea.